November 8, 1960. John F. Kennedy had just won the presidency, and Sammy Davis Jr. was waiting by the phone for the call that would change everything. The invitation to perform at the White House inaugural gala. But the phone never rang. What JFK's team told Sammy behind closed doors would expose one of the darkest secrets of Camelot. It was supposed to be the greatest moment of Sammy Davis Jr.'s career. He had campaigned harder for John F. Kennedy than almost any other entertainer in America. He had performed at rallies across the country, donated money, and used his fame to bring black voters to Kennedy's side. In the tight 1960 election, those votes had made the difference. Kennedy won by less than 120,000 votes, and political analysts agreed that Sammy's influence in key states like Illinois and Michigan had been crucial. On election night, November 8th, Sammy sat in his Los Angeles home with his closest friends, watching the results come in on television. When the networks finally called it for Kennedy, Sammy jumped up from his chair, tears streaming down his face. This wasn't just a political victory. This was personal. Kennedy represented a new America, one where a talented black entertainer could stand shoulder to shoulder with a president, where merit mattered more than skin color, where Camelot could have room for everyone. Frank Sinatra, who had organized most of Kennedy's celebrity support, called Sammy at midnight. His voice was jubilant, celebratory, already slurring slightly from champagne. He told Sammy that they had done it, that they had helped elect the youngest president in American history, and that January's inaugural gala was going to be the greatest show ever produced. Sinatra was organizing the whole thing, and of course, Sammy would be one of the headline performers. It was understood, assumed, promised without being explicitly stated. Sammy hung up the phone that night, believing he would soon perform for the President of the United States at the most watched event in American history. He went to bed imagining himself on that stage, singing for JFK, for Jackie, for all of America. It would be validation, proof that he had truly arrived, that America had truly changed. But the call confirming his performance never came. Days turned into weeks. November became December. Sammy's agent, William Morris, kept calling Sinatra's people, asking about the details, the song selection, the rehearsal schedule. Each time, they were told the program was still being finalized, that they would hear something soon, to just be patient. Sammy tried not to worry. Sinatra was his friend. This was just logistics. Big events took time to organize. Then, on December 10th, Sammy made a decision that would change everything. He married May Britt, a Swedish actress with blonde hair and blue eyes. The wedding made front-page news across America, and not because of celebrity gossip. Interracial marriage was still illegal in 31 states. Even in states where it was legal, it was considered scandalous, immoral, a violation of the natural order. Sammy knew this. He had been warned by friends, by his manager, even by Sinatra himself. But he loved May, and he believed that if Kennedy could break barriers, so could he. The backlash was immediate and vicious. Hate mail flooded Sammy's home by the thousands. Newspapers ran editorials condemning the marriage. Southern politicians used it as proof that Kennedy's civil rights sympathies were corrupting American values. And most dangerously for Kennedy, white voters in key swing states began expressing buyer's remorse about the election. Kennedy wasn't even inaugurated yet, and he was already facing a political nightmare. His advisors saw the polling numbers shifting. The coalition that had barely won him the election was fracturing. And at the center of it all was Sammy Davis Jr., the black entertainer who had campaigned for Kennedy and then married a white woman, making both Kennedy's support for civil rights and his celebrity endorsements look like liabilities. On December 15th, just 5 days after Sammy's wedding, Frank Sinatra received a phone call from Robert Kennedy, the president-elect's brother and closest advisor. The conversation was brief and brutal. Bobby Kennedy, speaking on behalf of his brother, told Sinatra that Sammy Davis Jr. could not perform at the inaugural gala. His presence would be too controversial. It would alienate Southern Democrats. It would give ammunition to Kennedy's critics. It was a political necessity. Sinatra argued. He said Sammy had earned his spot through his campaigning, through his talent, through his friendship. He reminded Bobby that black voters had been essential to Kennedy's victory. He pointed out the hypocrisy of excluding the one black entertainer who had done the most to help elect Kennedy. But Bobby Kennedy was unmoved. This wasn't about fairness. This wasn't about loyalty. This was about power, and the Kennedys knew how to keep it. Sinatra was given an ultimatum. He could tell Sammy himself, or the Kennedy team would do it publicly. Either way, Sammy was out. That evening, Sinatra sat in his Palm Springs home, staring at the phone for over an hour. He poured himself 3 drinks before he found the courage to make the call. When Sammy answered, his voice was bright, optimistic, asking if Frank was finally calling with the details about the inauguration. Sinatra couldn't bring himself to tell the truth directly. Instead, he talked in circles, mentioning political complications, delicate situations, timing issues. Sammy, who had spent his entire life reading between the lines of what white people said to him, understood immediately. The silence on the phone lasted nearly a full minute. Finally, Sammy spoke. His voice was quiet, controlled, but Frank could hear the devastation underneath. He asked if it was because of May. Sinatra hesitated, then confirmed it. Sammy asked if the decision was final. Sinatra said it came from the top. Sammy thanked him for calling and hung up. Frank Sinatra sat alone in his house that night, drinking until he passed out. He later told friends it was one of the worst nights of his life. He had betrayed a friend to serve politicians who didn't deserve either of them. Sammy Davis Jr. sat in his new home with his new wife, and for the first time since the wedding, he allowed himself to cry. May held him, not fully understanding the depth of what had just happened, but knowing that something fundamental had broken inside her husband. This wasn't just about missing a performance. This was about discovering that the America he had believed in, the one Kennedy represented, or at least, it was a truth reserved for everyone except him. The next morning, Sammy received a different kind of phone call. This one was from a Kennedy staffer, someone far down the chain of command, calling to deliver the official message. They phrased it diplomatically, saying that due to scheduling conflicts and program length constraints, some performers would need to be cut from the inaugural gala. They hoped Sammy understood. They valued his support. They hoped he would continue to support the president. Sammy listened to the entire speech without interrupting. When the staffer finished, Sammy asked a simple question. If I hadn't married May, would I still be performing? The staffer stammered, tried to deflect, insisted it wasn't about that. Sammy asked the question again. The staffer went silent. Sammy hung up. Instead of going public with his anger, instead of granting the interviews that every newspaper in America wanted, instead of condemning Kennedy and burning the bridges that could have destroyed his career, Sammy Davis Jr. chose silence. He released a brief statement through his publicist saying he understood the complexities of the political situation and wished President Kennedy well. Nothing more. But privately, Sammy made a different choice. He decided he would attend the inauguration anyway, not as a performer, not as a VIP guest, as a citizen. He bought a regular ticket, the kind any American could purchase, and on January 19, 1961, he sat in the audience at the inaugural gala, watching Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, and all the other performers take the stage he had been promised. People who saw him there said he sat perfectly still throughout the entire performance, his face unreadable. When Sinatra performed, singing The House I Live In, a song about American equality and brotherhood, some people in the audience turned to look at Sammy, wondering what he was thinking. He never changed his expression. After the performance, there was a reception. Sammy could have left, should have left, but he stayed, And when John F. Kennedy entered the room, Sammy positioned himself where the president would have to walk past him. Their eyes met. Kennedy, to his credit, stopped. He extended his hand. Sammy shook it. No words were exchanged. None were needed. Kennedy knew what he had done. Sammy knew that Kennedy knew. The handshake lasted perhaps 3 seconds, and then Kennedy moved on, surrounded by Secret Service and admirers. Sammy left the reception immediately after. The story could end there, with Sammy Davis Jr. as a victim of political calculation, a casualty of a system that would use his talent but not defend his dignity. But the truth is more complicated, and in some ways, more powerful. In the weeks and months following the inauguration, Sammy did something unexpected. He continued to support civil rights causes. He continued to perform for integrated audiences. He continued to speak about equality, even when it cost him bookings in segregated venues. And he stayed married to Mae Britt, even though his career advisors begged him to divorce her to restore his reputation. When reporters asked him about the inauguration, he gave the same answer every time. "I don't regret my choices, any of them." In 1963, 2 years after the inauguration, Sammy received an invitation to perform at a private White House dinner. It was a small affair, nothing like the inaugural gala, but it was an invitation nonetheless. Many people expected Sammy to refuse, to throw the invitation back in Kennedy's face as payback for the humiliation. Instead, Sammy accepted. He performed at the White House, singing the same songs he would have sung at the inaugural gala. Afterwards, Kennedy asked to speak with him privately. What was said in that conversation was never made public, but people close to Sammy said he came out of the meeting looking lighter, as if some weight had been lifted. Years later, in a rare interview about the incident, Sammy explained his thinking. He said that holding on to anger would have only hurt himself, that Kennedy was a product of his time, trying to navigate impossible political waters, that progress never moves in a straight line, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is keep showing up, keep performing, keep reminding people of your humanity, even when they try to erase you. But Sammy also said something else in that interview, something that revealed the true depth of what had happened to him in 1960. He said that the night Sinatra called to uninvite him from the inauguration was the night he stopped believing in Camelot. Not in Kennedy as a person, not in the civil rights movement, not in America's capacity to change, but in the myth of Camelot, the shining city on a hill where merit and talent would overcome prejudice and politics. He said he had learned that day that there were always going to be rooms he wouldn't be allowed into, stages he wouldn't be allowed on, not because of his talent or his character, but because of who he chose to love and the color of his skin. And he said that learning that lesson didn't make him bitter. It made him realistic. It made him focus his energy not on waiting for invitations from powerful people, but on breaking down the doors they tried to keep closed. Frank Sinatra never forgave himself for making that phone call. In private conversations with friends, he called it his greatest act of cowardice. In 1963, when organizing a civil rights benefit concert, he insisted that Sammy be the headliner, and when venues tried to object, Sinatra threatened to cancel the entire event. It was his way of apologizing, of trying to make amends for the betrayal. Sammy and Frank remained friends, but something had changed between them. There was a distance that had never been there before, a recognition of the different worlds they inhabited. Sinatra could afford to be politically risky. When things got too hot, he had the safety net of his whiteness. Sammy never had that luxury. The story of Sammy Davis Jr. and the inaugural gala that never was isn't just about one performer being excluded from one event. It's about the price of progress, the compromises powerful people make, and the courage it takes to keep moving forward when the people you trusted let you down. It's about the fact that Sammy campaigned for Kennedy, knowing that America wasn't ready for a Catholic president, believing that breaking one barrier would help break others. It's about discovering that the people who benefit from breaking barriers aren't always willing to help others break theirs. It's about choosing love over career safety, and then paying a price for that choice that went far beyond what anyone should have to pay. But most of all, it's about what Sammy Davis Jr. did after he was excluded. He didn't retreat. He didn't become cynical. He didn't stop fighting for the America he believed in, even though that America had rejected him at one of his highest moments. When John F. Kennedy was assassinated in November 1963, Sammy Davis Jr. wept publicly, not for the man who had excluded him from the inaugural gala, but for the president who had signed executive orders advancing civil rights, who had sent federal troops to integrate universities, who had, however imperfectly, moved America toward justice. Sammy understood something that many people never learn, that people are complicated, that progress is messy, and that sometimes the same person who hurts you can also help you. That didn't make the hurt less real, but it made the path forward more clear. Today there are photographs from Kennedy's inaugural gala. They show Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, Harry Belafonte, and other legends of American entertainment. If you look carefully at the program from that night, you won't find Sammy Davis Jr.'s name. It was erased, edited out, removed from the official record, as if he had never been scheduled to perform at all. But the people who were there remember. They remember the whispers about why Sammy wasn't performing. They remember the uncomfortable silence when his name wasn't called. They remember seeing him in the audience, sitting with perfect dignity, watching his friends perform on the stage that should have been his. And they remember that despite everything, despite the betrayal and the humiliation and the political calculation, Sammy Davis Jr. kept singing, kept performing, kept fighting, kept loving, kept showing up, because that's what it means to be truly great. Not to perform when it's easy, when you're welcomed and celebrated, but to keep performing when doors are slammed in your face, to keep believing in an America that doesn't quite believe in you yet, to keep extending your hand even to people who have pushed you away. The inaugural gala of 1961 was called the greatest night in entertainment history, and maybe it was. But the greatest performance that night wasn't on the stage. It was in the audience, where a man who had every right to be bitter chose grace instead, where a performer who had been erased from the program showed up anyway, where Sammy Davis Jr., excluded from Camelot, reminded everyone watching what Camelot was supposed to be about in the first place. If this story of courage, dignity, and the true cost of breaking barriers moved you, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more untold stories from music history. Share this with someone who needs to hear about the power of keeping your dignity when the world tries to take it from you. What would you have done in Sammy's position? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that notification bell for more stories about the legends who changed America, one performance at a time.